All right. Hello, Facebook. This is Tommy Valentine. I am the Executive Director of Historic Athens. It's my pleasure to be here with you today. We are so glad that you're joining us for what is episode 9 of our 55-part series, This Moment in History, COVID-19 in Athens, Georgia. We hope that wherever you are, that you're safe, that you're healthy, that your family is safe and healthy. And we're very excited to have a very special guest today. Today's guest is Erin Barger. You will know her from various community roles, but most recently, and for many of you, maybe the first place you've crossed paths with her multiple times in the same week, if not day. That's Envision Athens. And so we're going to be talking about Erin and about Envision Athens and about what they do. We're going to be bringing her on the stream with us here in just a moment. But before we do, I just want to give you a couple quick notes in case this is your first time tuning in to this program. First of all, if you want to participate in the program, you can absolutely just jump in the comment section, share a question, share a comment. We'll bring it up on screen, share it with Erin, get that question answered, get that comment shared. In doing so, you'll not only participate in today, but part of the goal of these programs is to produce a historical artifact that we can contribute to local research institutions and libraries. And so our hope is that these programs will be viewed decades from now to give people a clear sense of what this moment in Athens history was like. By contributing a comment or a question, you're contributing to that historic narrative. And so we hope that you'll join us with that. One last note before we bring Erin on. We are Historic Athens. We're a 52-year-old nonprofit that works to celebrate and conserve community heritage here in Athens, Georgia. We really appreciate all of your support. And so with that said, we want to go ahead and bring Erin into the stream. As I said, please share any questions or comments you have, and we'll make sure to bring them on with Erin. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and bring Erin on with us. Erin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Tommy,
All right,
hi.
great.
Hey,
Erin, can you hear
everybody.
me loud
Thanks
and
for
clear?
having me. It's an honor to be here. Yes. How about me? We good on time?
Of course. Yes. Yep, we're good.
We're good.
We may have the slightest of lags, but that is an accurate thing to record when we're looking at this moment in history, because this moment in history is full of video chats and technical difficulties. So, yeah. So, Erin, just to get started here, we'd love if you could kind of start by sharing who you are and telling us a little bit about the work that Envision Athens does.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I have had the honor of calling Athens my home for 11 years now. Relocated here to work in nonprofit leadership, working directly with folks in poverty. And about 2+ years ago, became the project manager for Envision Athens after serving as a citizen volunteer steering committee member with that effort. So as it moved from planning to implementation, I became the project manager. And Envision Athens is essentially the 20-year community and economic development strategy for Athens, Clarke County.
Now, Erin, this isn't your first role when it comes to helping Athens, Clarke County. I know that even now you're serving in more than one role in how you affect this community. But can you tell us a little bit about your history with Athens, your past history in serving Athens, and all the different ways that you've come to know this community?
Absolutely. One of my absolute favorite places in Athens is the community kitchen, Our Daily Bread. And so I moved here in 2009 after serving in China for a couple of years as a Peace Corps volunteer, completed post-secondary grad education at UNC Chapel Hill. And my goal was to move here and engage in nonprofit leadership. And at that time, my experience working with people on the margins was really serving adults with developmental disabilities. I spent some time in refugee resettlement. And moving to Athens was really my first opportunity to work directly hand in hand with people experiencing both chronic and episodic poverty. So I spent about 9 years, working with folks through the Our Daily Bread Community Kitchen, and also adding programs to the suite of what was available to include adult education and connection to other services. But I think the most important thing to note about that and how it impacted my life is just becoming, on a first name basis with people. And, I had learned this lesson in other ways, working with other folks on the margins, but just realizing all that I had to learn from people with different life experiences. And, I already, I think, hopefully had the humility to know this, but was reminded on a daily basis that people who are experiencing poverty often have more resilience and ingenuity and innovation and intelligence than they're given credit for. And so it was just a remarkable opportunity and a very humbling opportunity to walk that path with people for that almost decade that I worked in that position.
Excellent. I want to go back to Envision Athens. And so I, appreciate the 30,000 foot view on Envision. Envision is something that for the average Athens citizen, maybe they've participated in collecting some data, sharing their voices. Maybe they've seen some of the billboards that I always compliment you on, just because it represents such a great cross section of Athens. But Envision is also almost all encompassing. You're doing so many different things. How does Envision juggle so many different priorities? How does that work?
That's a great question. We do that the way that I have always encountered any level of success or efficacy, and that is in partnership with other brilliant people. And so I think it's really helpful to know, many of you who are familiar with Envision know this very well, that we are a convener, a catalyst, a collaborator. We do not exist to directly impact by delivering programs. Rather, we are bringing people together, and through the 14 different domains of Envision, we are successful only to the extent that people trust us and continue to invest their time in the myriad of work groups that we've helped organize. So it's an interesting form of community organizing, bringing together the best of grassroots activism plus institutional capacity. Add to that a really robust, thoughtful plan that we took about 18 to 20 months to create. And then moving into implementation, we're working with lead coordinators across each of these 14 different domains, and then engaging citizens and institutional leads in each of these categories to really bring to the community a citizen-led effort and initiative.
So I'm tempted to ask a question that I don't think there's actually an answer for. I was going to say, what is a week like in Envision Athens? But I don't know if there's any such thing as a standard week. But if we were to flash back a couple months ago before coronavirus really unfolded, what was maybe a fair sample size would be a month? What does a month look like for Athens?
That's a great question. And actually, because technology is amazing, I'll pull up my Google Calendar and just look. That's what a month looks like. But just to give you, I think this is a really great question, actually, to give you a sense of the cadence. Usually every first week, Envision is convening its health work group and its safety work group. So those teams are convening around the behavioral health crisis that Athens is experiencing, along with, I think, every other community across the nation. The safety work group is meeting to take a look at community supervision, how probation services are offered, and to increase the optimum blend of accountability plus opportunity. So that's week one, along with any other community events. Week four in a given month would include bringing together the group Educate Athens, which is focused on workforce development across the lifespan. Week three usually includes a conversation with an economic development roundtable, along with ongoing communications across domains such as the agriculture domain has a work group called Abundance Athens that works with UGA Food Shed to increase fresh food access, especially for East Side residents of Athens, Clarke County. So I'll stop there just because that's anymore, I think would just be too much to share and might not be that interesting, but that gives you kind of a flashpoint.
Sure. Uh, I don't think this sounds like the kind of job that anyone could be ready for because it involves working with so many different areas. Uh, how have you grown since doing this job? What areas of expertise have you had to suddenly develop?
Great question. I I didn't realize two key things. There's a lot I'm sure that I didn't realize, but two things come to mind. One, when I agreed to serve as the project manager, I was certain that a public-private partnership like Envision Athens was not entirely uncommon, and I
Mm,
thought that there were a myriad of playbooks from which I could recite and consult, and that I would have this network of project managers across the nation. So I remember going to San Francisco in the first spring to present about Envision Athens and looking around the room and realizing from the questions that were being asked that actually taking something like Envision Athens and implementing it and
mhm.
really moving this forward and building momentum and keeping it going is actually truly rare.
Yeah,
To be completely honest, because we're friends, if I had realized how little of a playbook there would be, I might have asked for like a couple months to do some research and realize what I was getting into. So, when we launched, honestly, there was this runway that we were launching from while we were paving it. So
yeah.
that's an interesting thing I've learned. And then I think if any single thing has helped us succeed, it has been that I have no problem at all not being the expert in the room. And therefore, across these 14 different domains where I have some expertise in one or two of them, there is no human alive, maybe Bill Gates, who has, like working expertise in 14 different domains.
Right.
And so just going into that space, not only not, I don't feel challenged by, I don't feel insecure about not being the expert in 14 different domains. I actually celebrate the fact that I am not the expert, and therefore I have the honor of uplifting and celebrating the expertise of other community partners. And
Mhm.
I think people appreciate working with folks who don't have to have all the answers and are willing to defer and make room for their expertise, as well as people who make space for all people, which is just a personal value of mine that I think finds a really nice place in the world of Envision Athens.
Erin, before I even had this job, I remember having a conversation with you once about the difficulty of fixing a plane while you're flying it. I love that you said that you weren't even in the air. You had to pave the runway while it was already uh, headed down the runway itself. But how do you manage that tension? The idea of fixing a plane while flying, especially such a very publicly involved and visible plane.
Well, I think the guiding proverb that if any of you online watching have been to probably just about any Envision Athens meeting or event, our guiding proverb is to go fast, go alone, and to go far, go together.
Mhm.
And so, and those of you who have worked with me before or know me personally, probably know that I'm a pretty action oriented person. I'm pretty outcomes driven. I like to know where things are going, to have a sense of where we're headed and to move there as effectively but also as expeditiously as possible. And so one area where I have tried to be very conscientious is ensuring that we do not ever move forward and pursue an action at the expense of including other perspectives. And so that has meant, at some points, hitting the pause button and slowing down or just really stopping to
Mm.
ensure that that sufficient perspectives are included. So I think that's a key. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I think that
No,
has been
absolutely.
really
Yeah.
important.
So we're going to transition here a little bit from what the standard work is like to what this specific situation is
Yeah.
called for. Um, I do want to say, and Victoria, who often reads my mind, the wonderful
Um,
Victoria that all nonprofits in Athens depend on. Victoria just said, "Love seeing these two awesome faces today." Victoria, now your face is on here, so now it's three faces. So that's always good. But I yes, for those of you that want to ask questions, you certainly can. Questions or comments. I'm going to bring up Gary Birch.
Ooh,
We love Gary and Joan Birch. They were our weekly sponsors last week. This week is brought to you by Dan and Corey Delamater. So we really appreciate the
yeah.
families and organizations that have made this broadcast possible. Gary's question is, can you tell us about your time in China and how that affected your values and future?
Hmm. Gary, I love that question. I was just thinking about this recently. One of the books I found most useful that we actually read in China and created a training for other Peace Corps volunteers while in China to help them manage the stress of the immense cultural differences between East and West is a book called what is it called? The Geography of Thought by Richard
Mm.
Nisbett. And he points out in that book what my answer to your question, Gary, which is that Westerners are much more likely to commit the fundamental attribution error. And the United States is considered to be like the ultimate representation of Western thought, while China is considered to be kind of the epitome of Eastern thought. So if you're wanting a cultural clash or a challenge as a US American, there's really no more challenging place you could spend 27 months than China. And it was incredibly challenging. By the way, Chinese is a really difficult language to learn. But essentially, the takeaway from that, that I think applies beautifully to the days of COVID, is the fundamental attribution error is an error that we Westerners are more likely to make in that assuming negative behavior on the part of other people is based in a character flaw on their part. But when we commit an error, it's based on a circumstance. So, in other words, just to kind of bring it home, Tommy, if you do something I don't like, Westerners are more likely to make the assumption you did something that I disagree with because you are a inconsiderate or
Mm.
not a thoughtful person. But if I make the same mistake, I made that mistake because I was in a moment of stress or I've had a very difficult day. So that's a long way of saying that serving in that situation was incredibly humbling. It brings out the best and worst of people, but noting how our culture, that we are products of our culture, and that means, for better or worse, specific things about how we interpret other people, how we make judgments, how we communicate, how we react to stress, has just been like a lifelong gift to me and being able to understand myself and others.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that, Erin. I also just wanted to, we're encouraging people to spend their dollars with local businesses here. One of our favorite local partners that do lots of events at our fire hall is Avid Bookshop. We appreciate Janet Geddes of Avid being on the program last week. You can go back and find her video in the archives of our Facebook page. But the book that Erin was discussing, The Geography of Thought, I've shared a link in the comment section.
Nice.
And so if you wish to purchase it, you can purchase it from Avid right now. They will mail it to your house. It will probably be covered in Janet's handwritten notes and drawings. So that's a win-win.
Nice.
Uh, Days like today are definitely good reading days, especially if we're trapped inside. So, Gary, thanks for sharing that question. And Erin, that's a very illuminating answer. Thank you. Jeremy Field just chimed in to ask Erin, how can we stay or get
Mm,
involved with Envision during this time?
great question. So, there are actually a few different ways to answer that question. So an easy answer is to look on our website, our webpage, envisionathens.com, and that will actually give you a great sense of what we have been doing since we launched into implementation in 2018. And then we've actually created a couple of guides there. One is a citizen engagement guide for how you can support and engage community depending on where your area of interest lies. For instance, if you're interested in agriculture and fresh food, we make some recommendations. We've also created a guide for how to love your community in troubling times that gives you kind of a top 10 places to invest. That's also available on our website. And then a couple of other things we're doing right now, and I would love your thoughts, your feedback, and your participation. Include creating the initiative Athens Works, and you can check that out at athensworksinitiative.com. And that is an opportunity to simply celebrate and encourage Athens to do what it does best, which is to love our neighbor by investing our resources locally. So I'll give you the chance to look through that on your own, but in short, it invites you to take the pledge to invest your stimulus check by supporting local businesses, and then supporting some of the everyday heroes who are rising to this unique occasion. The Sugiuchi family creating face shield, the mask making groups all over town, the groups that are connecting meals to our local healthcare workers. So I think it is very much in the spirit of Envision, not to only direct you to kind of where we can help you plug in, but also to really spotlight and celebrate the dozens of people who are functioning as everyday heroes in this interesting time. But that's envisionathens.com to get connected, and you're welcome to email me now and in the future at Erin@envisionathens.com. Great question. Thank you.
All right, we are flying fast with these links here. All right, so Erin, I want to get to uh, really the direct meat of how coronavirus has affected you and affected Envision. Before we do that, if you don't mind, I'm just going to very briefly bring up on screen our annual sponsors. Erin knows how this works. 501c3s can't survive alone, and so I just want to make sure we thank these folks. The people you see on screen are our annual sponsors. These are the people that support our 501c3 nonprofit. We are a local nonprofit like anyone else, and so we depend on this kind of generosity. So please take a look at those names. If you see anyone there that you can support, please do support them. They support our mission to celebrate and conserve community heritage here in Athens, Georgia. I also want to mention, in addition to the names you see here, we have hundreds of local people here in Athens that support us as donor members. It's very quick and easy to become a donor member. You can do so for as little as $5 a month. You can just visit historicathens.com to become a member. In times like these, every single dollar matters. Keeping our team employed, keeping our mission moving, all those things depend on everyday citizens here in Athens that believe that our mission is important. If you want to find out more about that mission, you can email me directly, tommy@historicathens.com, or visit historicathens.com. And we really appreciate it. And again, I want to make sure we emphasize some folks are beyond generous, and those folks do include Dan and Corey Delamater, who sponsored this week's programming, these 5 programs this week. So we want to make sure we, again, emphasize how thankful we are for them. So Erin, jumping back on screen here with you. So one of the questions that I've been trying to ask is, each person we talk to describes COVID coming into their periphery in different ways. You're an exceptionally busy person. You're already having to, I can't even imagine what your inbox looks like each day. You've got all this news flying at you. You have a family. You've got all these other roles. Where in your vision, in your bandwidth, in your periphery, did this first start creeping in, and when did you realize it was time to start taking it seriously?
As I traveled back from Universal Studios, no lie, on March 13th. That week was, I'm sure this was bigger news and more prevalent news in other locations globally, but I feel like it really came to our reality in a very concrete way that week of March 9th. And I was actually traveling that week because at the time we didn't realize how serious this was. And literally as that trip closed for spring break, I was traveling back, had actually never been to that location before, traveled there with my husband and the Barger boys. And on the way back, I was just kind of, as you do, you're kind of returning from vacation, kind of easing back in. And as I started seeing the news and my inbox and phone calls, I realized that we were returning to a completely different reality. And, within hours, the resort or the hotel that I had just visited was closing the following
Wow.
week. We went into full lockdown, appointments were canceled, and we all, I think, encountered this dramatic pivot and started asking questions about, okay, the community needed this last week. What do they need now? And quickly moved from knowing nothing about personal protective equipment to actually having a working knowledge of that and determining, who's making what, how can we connect, not only the usual suspects, but people who might not be on the radar of everyone, to the resources they need to do the work that has to be done, connecting people to food, for instance.
Yeah. Jeremy just had chimed in to say he was supposed to be at Universal May. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's really fascinating just to see how how these things unfold. That's such a crazy time. Also, I just want to say the Barger Boys sound like the greatest band I've never seen. I can't wait to catch them at the 40 Watt. That sounds awesome.
I actually
Uh,
refer to them as the Brothers Barger, like the
oh
movie The
yeah,
Brothers Bloom.
yeah,
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 they're
yeah.
formerly known as the Brothers Barger.
Well, it's never too late to bring it back. And
Yeah.
they have the stylish haircuts to really play the music scene too. Um, Erin, going back to this kind of creeping in reality, uh, I can't think of an organization. I mean, it's something Historic Athens struggled with because we're an education advocacy group. So much of what we do is meeting with people, hearing people's stories that have been previously unheard, doing what Fred
Mhm.
Smith says, telling the whole story. So much of what we do is in person, one coffee meeting at a time, one Linden House Center meeting at a time. I know it was tough for us, but I don't know of an organization that exists that's more meeting based than Envision.
Mhm.
So many, we've asked some of our guests what they think the symbols or images of this time that will live on in the same way that the towers or the flags or the I Love New York shirts came to represent 9/11. And one of the best answers we've gotten so far was someone said, tiny little boxes, that we'll all think of this time as tiny little boxes, all these Zoom meetings we're having, all these video meetings. Did it,
Yeah,
how, what was that transition like for Envision from in-person roundtables
yeah,
to video conferencing?
right. We made a very quick transition. I believe that that first week that it became clear what responsible meeting would require, David Bradley and I had a conversation on a Wednesday afternoon, realizing that more than I've ever seen, this community had a strong appetite for and an immense need to come together. That was a Wednesday afternoon. And by the next afternoon, we hosted our first community check in call. And
Mm,
it was so interesting. You know my personality well enough, Tommy, to know that like it's not really my style to come up with a meeting with like less than 24 hours
mm,
notice. But we did it. We're like, let's just see what happens. Give it a try. And the call was less than 24 hours later on a Thursday afternoon. And we had more than 100 people call in with very little notice. So in that case, we did what we always do, which is we called on our partners and collaboratively determined how we were going to respond to the needs of the community after listening to, community feedback. And so we created two, and there are more venues than this, but two key venues for community members to engage and check in are the community check-in call that Envision and the Chamber of Commerce host every Wednesday at 9 a.m. And those calls are completely open. I think it's important to note that even for people who don't have the technology or Zoom, there are call-in numbers. So people who just have a phone can call in and engage in those calls. Mayor Gertz is on that call every week to provide an update. We have nonprofit leaders providing an update, and then an update for the for-profit business community, an update from the school district. So providing that space for a general check-in, and then the very next day, every Thursday at 10 a.m., there is a check-in for nonprofit leaders. So those are two kind of examples of how we did
Yeah.
what we do, but in a way that's responsive to the reality.
When you said that, when you brought up those initial discussions with David Bradley from the Chamber of Commerce, and we love the Athens Area Chamber of Commerce is actually one of the weekly sponsors for this
Yeah.
program. We love David. David will be a guest later. But I'm wondering if you went through the same kind of adjustment that I hear so many other people describe, which is, so you wake up one day, the world's changed, and you have this organization that was developed with a pretty specific use for a pretty specific world. And then you have to recalibrate it. And there's probably some existential crisis in there, trying to decide how to be a good leader and all of that.
Yeah.
But on the other side of that crisis, with proper innovation, your organization might suddenly be more useful or critical than ever. I know that, the Athens Area Chamber of Commerce, we've seen it become incredibly critical and vital. I know that at Historic Athens, we've really tried to decide what is our mission in this moment and how do we serve this community in the right way. What you're describing, the type of comfort and information sharing that you're doing on behalf of Envision Athens, does that feel like maybe some of the most vital work you've ever done? I mean, has it been, I know this is a difficult time to be excited, but is it exciting work in some ways?
It is. It is. And I appreciate that question because I'll be honest, when it hit me on that Friday, what we were returning to, I did have a moment where I wondered, like, what does this job look like? If we're not
Mm,
able to get together, what is our utility? What is our purpose? And I know that our purpose is important, but in other words, is our purpose even possible to
right.
pursue? And
Absolutely.
it's so interesting that that question was answered almost immediately by more than 100 people dialing in to be a part of the conversation. We have 80 plus people on this nonprofit call every week. And then I'm realizing that like all of you probably know, one of my favorite friends and colleagues, Sarah McKinney, always quotes
Mhm.
the founder, Miss Kellogg, in terms of relationships are primary, all else is derivative.
Mm,
And so I can't really overstate the work that Envision has done for the past 2 years to build trusting relationships.
yeah,
Without that, I actually would posit, I don't know what our utility would be right now if we
right,
had not built those relationships, but because we've spent 2 years, making ourselves useful and creating those connections, I have been busier in the last 2 weeks than I've ever been before, and I was
right.
pretty busy before, with people asking Envision to help connect them, relying on us, for just suggestions and guidance for how to move forward in some key areas. Um, I think one of my favorite roles to serve in the community is just having these kind of sticky connections to people and groups that don't always come to mind for folks. And so connecting um, face shields, for instance, to specific frontline workers who may not be known about across the board. It's just been an honor to be able to kind of serve in that way behind the scenes and then celebrate the amazing work that other people are doing behind the scenes. And I think give them the honor that they deserve for the sacrifices that they're making, which is really what we were created to do.
Yeah. The a few days after everything hit, when we were first having discussions about having to close the Athens Welcome Center down, we were on a conference call with Chuck Jones from the CVB, who I know you know Chuck well. And Chuck's been in hospitality for so long. And I asked him, I said, do you have any, is there any precedence for this, for the types of changes we're seeing here? And he said, no, but he gave a really interesting answer on why. He said, it hasn't been within our lifetimes that we've had a crisis where we couldn't then come together as an in-person community.
Mhm.
So, after 9/11, or, I mean, you can go back all the way to Pearl Harbor. I mean, if you have a large crisis, typically the community can come together. You can hold one another, you can hug one another, you can comfort one another. That sense of in-person communities happened. This is the first time within generations we've had a crisis where we've had to stay apart while in crisis. So
Yeah.
it so
Yeah.
it sounds to me like one of the things that Envision Athens has been able to do is help us stay connected and maintain a sense of community. Do you see it as having that role?
Absolutely, and I didn't realize because I am such an in-person person, if I have the choice for especially an important conversation, I would always rather have that be in person. And, one thing that I think we all learned through the initiation of these Zoom spaces is when we are not able to gather, simply encountering the voices and the faces of people we hold dear has been a really priceless, close second. I mean, it's what we have. So I think when we think about loving our neighbor and the fact that love is an active verb, what this has required is that we redefine what love means.
Mm,
Normally, if that's the ability to show affection in certain ways, for me, love is redefined as putting my mask on, getting in my mom van, and delivering face shields every other day
wow.
in a contactless way. It's just figuring out what do my neighbors need. And it's a great opportunity to kind of rethink what love is, which is really all about meeting other people where they're at, and it's about what others need. And sometimes that means we're not getting our needs met
Right.
in the way that we might formerly by that, that in-person contact. So it's been an interesting time to
Yeah.
engage.
Erin, I want to, in a moment, we're going to transition to the three questions we close out each of these interviews with. We've got about, 17 minutes or so left together, but Uh, and of course, we do have time to answer one or two more community submitted questions. So if you're watching this broadcast and you have a question for Erin or a comment, please do just as many of our guests have done and make a comment under this video. But Erin, I think back of all the years I've known you, and I don't know if you perceive yourself this way, but I think of you as a pretty unflappable person. There's that expression about never let them see you sweat, and I don't know if I've ever actually seen you sweat, except when it was intentional and some like photo of you just completing a workout or something. I mean, you you are a pretty unflappable person. Has it been hard to maintain that persona and that approach publicly during a time like
Um,
this?
I really appreciate that, Tommy. I think those of you who know me well probably know that it isn't necessarily my intent to come across as unflappable. I mean, it's interesting because those of you who have seen me in a lot of different environments, especially in some of our work groups, when we have really challenging conversations, is I definitely show emotion, and a lot of the work that we do is hard hitting. I mean, in our health group, for instance, we're talking about people who are dying from the disease of addiction. And
Mm,
I'm sitting with people who have lost friends and family members to really difficult things. And so I think that leadership during this time is this very interesting combination of not making it about me, but also allowing myself to be human. And I think that maybe for some people, maybe that doesn't work for them, but for me, I don't know how to be not authentic, like, literally, I don't know how, um,
Mm,
to not be who I am, and if I, am connecting with someone suffering, they can tell that, and I think, there's obviously, like, an appropriate way to do that,
sure.
but all that to say, I think that what the community needs from leaders right now is the ability to stay the course and not make things, about them, to not politically posture, etc. But I also think that one of the best things that we can do, um, those of us who have any type of leadership position, is to allow others to see, that this is challenging. A couple of times I have, in my own private space, you know, broke down and shed some tears. I remember the first time I cried from the strain and the stress of COVID, was when my brother's dog died. It was just this moment where one of the sweetest, like, beings you've ever met, and it was that moment of that loss that really opened the floodgates for me. And when I cried about that loss, I was really crying about all that we have lost. So I think it's important. I know that's a lot of words, but just to kind of make space for, when is it time to stay focused and be somewhat formal, and give people a confident sense of vision, and to help people see that, we're not losing our focus. But then I think it's just as important to stop and acknowledge, like, this is really difficult, and I am sorry for all of this suffering that people are encountering right now, and that hits me on a human level.
So I want to transition here to kind of our last area of questioning for the 15 or so odd minutes we have together. So the first question we've been asking each guest, and Erin, I want to say thanks for that answer. It is describing what it's like to maintain sincerity, even when that means being vulnerable to things. That's something that that's not always easy to talk about, and I appreciate you carrying that sensitivity over to your answer. So these last few questions, so we have three questions we've been asking each of our guests. Uh, for our first question, it seems light in some ways, I guess, but I think it's illuminating. So, what what are some things you miss right now? I mean, restaurants that we love are closed. Restaurants that you and I
Yeah.
go eat together are closed. Uh,
Yes.
uh, that
Yeah.
there are things that we can't do in a city full of things to do. What are some of the things that, if shelter in place was removed tomorrow, if you were convinced everything was safe, what would be some of your first stops? What are some things you miss?
So that is so easy to answer for me, just on the spot. I was actually at the Grit picking up an order yesterday, and so one thing I'm so grateful for is that for the businesses who have creatively, made that pivot to offer curbside contactless
Mm,
delivery. I'm so thankful for the innovation of our community partners. So I'm still able to patronize the Grit, but they don't have the veggie board. And I understand why, but every time I call, it's like I always start with the veggie board, and if they have curry, every time I order the curry. So, one of the first orders of business will be to order from the veggie board, curry from the pit, and, get as book as many shows as possible at the 40 Watt, Georgia
yes,
Theater.
yes,
One
yeah.
of my most recent memories, was seeing Shovels and Rope at the Georgia Theater, just a few weeks back, and now that
Mm,
seems forever ago. So
wow,
I
yeah.
can't wait just to have that opportunity to do what we love to do in Athens.
Absolutely. Sarah Young just chimed in with a comment that I'll share on screen here about Erin. The most feeling person I know, but consistently bold and brave. Erin is an enigma. I could not agree more. Erin is an enigma wrapped in a puzzle,
Ah!
dipped in a cryptogram. But Sarah, thank you for sharing that. Sometimes I like to ask the guest to respond to comments. I'm going to let Erin off the hook there. Um, uh, but Erin, that is how you're perceived, as a strong enigma. So, all right. My second to last question. So one of the things that Historic Athens does, one of our components is historic preservation,
Mhm.
and in the historic preservation community right now, one of the discussions is that when you come out of a recession or when you come out of a large event like this, traditionally historic spaces can rapidly become endangered just in the need or the perceived need to develop. So overnight, uh, in times like these, post recession times, really important sites can become in peril. What we've been asking each of our guests are what are some of your favorite Athens historic sites that you hope that if somebody's watching this interview 50, 60 years from now, that they can still go out and enjoy? What are some of your favorite historic places in Athens?
A couple places come to mind. One would be the Brooklyn Cemetery.
Mm,
That is the go-to, when my family is looking to volunteer outside in the community. I think I've mentioned the brothers Barger. We have 3 sons, and they can actually get a lot of yard work done. They're
nice.
pretty effective in that way. And so, Tommy, I know that you provide really great leadership in connecting people to stewarding historic
Mm,
places. And
thank you.
so that's just a really lovely historic place that I think deserves our stewardship. And, we have leaders like Linda Davis who help ensure that those spaces are cared for. So I really appreciate your work, Tommy, and the legacy of Historic Athens. Another location that comes to mind, which is very personal for me, is a Coney Street United Methodist Church.
Yep.
Um, and that is because, as you know well, Our Daily Bread was hosted and housed there for more than 25 years before the fire that dramatically changed, the reality of that location. And
Right.
that location for me signifies immense hospitality and love for neighbors. So it will always be one of my favorite places in Athens.
Thanks for sharing that. On the note of Brooklyn Cemetery, I just think that this is as good a time as any. There's a local organization some of you may be familiar with. It's called 100 Plus Women Who Care in Athens. There's different chapters. We supervise the Brooklyn Cemetery Fund on the behalf of Linda Davis and the wonderful stewards over there. And it just shows what a great community we have. 100 Plus Women Who Care Athens recently worked to bring together, I think, $6,000 in contributions to Brooklyn Cemetery, and we,
Yeah.
yeah, we are a community that cares about our history, and that makes this job fun. But yes, the places you just named, I hope they're here for generations. Erin, one last comment I'm going to share, and then we'll go to you for the last question. Uh, Gary
Mhm.
Birch just said, thank you both for this wonderful conversation, for all that you both do. Gary, thank you for what you do for helping us do what we do. So, Erin, as our final question, and feel free to take as much time on this as you'd like, going back to those future generations that could be absorbing the content of this interview at a later time, 50, 60, 100 years from
Mhm.
now, what would you want them to know about Athens in this moment?
Mm. I would just kind of look at Athens right now. In other words, if I could just kind of look through this lens and see all of Athens, what I would want to say to this community is that Athens, Georgia, you were created, you Athenians were created in the image of something so much greater and more lovely than any single unit or individual of us. And since you have created a home for me more than 10 years ago, I have seen you, at your best. And and in some broken moments together. But you, Athens, are so lovely and so loved. And you have taken this very challenging time and you have done, Athens, what you always do. You have taken a dive deep within. You have decided very intentionally who you want to be, and you have come together and you have loved your neighbor. And I believe that because of that, there is something divine smiling down on all of the sacrifices that are being made, all of the people that are celebrating together, suffering together, choosing to join in this collective moment of deciding who we're going to be. So I am so proud to be in Athens, Georgia, and to be a part of you.
Erin, I feel bad for the next person that has to answer that question. It was an exceptional answer. Thank you for sharing it with us. For those of you that are tuning in each day, tomorrow at 1 o'clock, as a reminder, we're going to be doing this every weekday until June 26th, each day with a different community leader. Tomorrow will be a special discussion with Shane Blackwell. Shane is the owner of Mac and Payne Funeral Home. That is I believe, 100-year-old African-American legendary and historic funeral home. We're really looking forward to Shane's perspective on this moment and how it's affected what he does, the work he does in his community. We appreciate everyone that's tuning in and that's asking questions. Please share this interview with other people. And if you have ideas on who we should be interviewing, we still have about a dozen of the 55 slots available. Feel free to email us or direct message us, and we'd be happy to hear your feedback. Erin, on behalf of Historic Athens, thank you not only for your time today, but for the work you're doing to keep us all sewn together.
Mm.
We're supposed to keep our distance right now, but you're keeping us connected. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So, all right.
Tommy,
Well,
it's an honor to be your friend and to support your work. I'm proud of you, and I really appreciate this conversation today.
and this is where we document live that I have trouble processing compliments, but thank you. uh, uh, thank you, Erin. That means a lot. Thank you. All right. Well, thanks to you all. We really appreciate it. Thanks to Erin for her support, and we will be back tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Please take care. Stay safe. Stay healthy. Thank you.